What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman here for the final division preview of the AFC. We're talking AFC West today. We're going to tell you how that division is going to shape up for the 2024 season, at least through our eyes. We'll talk offensive and defensive MVPs for each team, some breakout candidates, our favorite rookie for every team, and so much more. Dalton, before we get into it, how you doing, my friend?
Chilling, man. Look, listen, I'm excited, chilling, big time. Look, I'm excited. Let me tell you, man. We got hours away from Week 1 of college football. We're a week away from Chiefs Ravens and the NFL starting. Trevor, let me tell you how excited I am for football season, man. I'm locked in. You ever been so like excited and locked in on something mentally that you almost like forget how to do other stuff?
I mean, of course, yeah, but do you have a specific example? I feel like you have like a specific example, or are you just saying that's how you're feeling right
absolutely.
now?
I'm just making sure I'm not the only one with this problem. No, I'm so locked in on football right now. Let me tell you how locked in I am on football right now. A couple of days ago, I'm prepping for the college show, our college preview, and I'm like watching tape and doing notes. I'm like, okay, let me eat lunch, because that's what normal people do, right? And Trevor, all I'm trying to do is make a turkey sandwich. Okay, I take out the plate. I take out bread and turkey and cheese and nothing else because I'm plain like that. But either way, I take out all the pieces and I'm like so locked in on football and I'm like just such a sicko like that. And I look at everything and for like legitimately like 10 to 15 seconds, I like forgot how to make a sandwich. I just like did not. I looked. I stood there for like 15 seconds. I was like, how does this work? It looked like I was building a Lego set. I swear to God. It was like, just like, I'm like so locked in right now. I can hardly even think about anything else. Like with the season starting and just where we're at right now, I was like, I don't even know how to make a sandwich anymore. I don't even know what I'm doing.
Did you, I can't remember if I said this on the show or not, but did you catch the Sean McVay thing where I don't even remember which interview specifically it was, but he was saying, yeah, my wife gets mad at me all the time because I don't know how to do like regular human things. Like my brain is just like, I have so much allocated to the game of football in my head that I don't know like how to do the laundry properly or like whatever, like mowing the grass. I don't remember what examples that he gave, but he was like, I don't know how to do normal things because it's just all ball up here. And that's you. You're on the McVay path right now.
Yeah, that's me. That's me right now. Like it was literally 2 days ago. I legitimately forgot how to make. I'm 30 years old and I forgot how to make a sandwich. It just left me. I was like, wow, this is. You sometimes certain things you take for granted that you're like, wait, that shouldn't be a skill, but now it's suddenly a skill I've lost for a moment. What is going on here? Like that's how I know we're really, really close to football season. Is I'm in that boat. Casual things all of a sudden just got difficult.
Look, I'm a sandwich purist. I like to keep things very simple. But I mean, were you not going to put any condiments on that bad boy at all? You were just going straight turkey and cheese with the buns?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
All right, that's some sicko behavior, but we can dig into that throughout the season because we'll have plenty of opportunities to be able to do that. Before we get into the AFC West, who we have winning this division, it's not going to be too big of a shocker, but how they're going to win it and how far we think they're going to go. I want you guys to do this. Picture a future where your child has the financial freedom to pursue their dreams without any barriers. With a UGMA account from Fabric by Gerber Life, it's a real possibility because of the simple but impactful actions that you can take today. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. All online, and setting up an account could take you just 5 minutes with as little as $1 a day. Then you can manage your child's UGMA account and monitor their investments right from your phone. UGMA, it stands for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest while they're minors, the UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. There's no contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, SIPC insured up to $500,000. No commission fee. Is just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That is meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional service provided by Apex Clearing Corporations. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contributions are required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, Dalton. AFC West. Who you got winning this bad boy? Who's coming in? I'm actually less interested in who you have winning. And I am more interested in who you have coming in third, what the record is. And then, actually, no, second, third, fourth. Give me the records. Give me the team. How do you think this division is shaping out?
Well, the obvious is the obvious, and I've got the Chiefs in first place and taking the number one seed, actually, in the AFC. I've got them with a pretty hefty record. I mean, you talk about adding Xavier Worthy, figuring out their tackle situation. They won a Super Bowl two Super Bowls, really, without throwing vertically. I've got them at 15-2. I think it's going to be a monster year for the Chiefs. They didn't lose any pieces, really, other than L'Jarius Sneed. They've just got, I mean, they're loaded anytime. This feels a lot like the way it used to feel like with New England in the AFC East, right, where it's just like, it's them, and then it's everybody else just clawing and scratching, right? But I've got the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers at 7-10. I think there's going to be an improvement there. I think the big thing for them is just playing more fundamentally sound football. Get into that in a little bit. I have the Raiders at 5-12. I know their defense got a lot better down the stretch last year, but I'm a little worried about the Raiders in this quarterback situation. It doesn't sound great from what we've heard from camp and from the preseason. There's a bit of this that reminds me with the Raiders, like we had with the Falcons last year when it was like, oh, we feel really good about Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke and what's going on here. And I'm like, I don't know if there's an actual solution here at quarterback. And then Denver I have at 4-13, and they could be better than that with Sean Payton and Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is bringing a lot of optimism there, but I don't love their roster. Really struggled on defense for the most part last year outside of that 5-game winning streak they had in the middle of the year. And at the skill spots at receiver outside of Cortland Sutton, I need to see who else is going to step up for them.
So I see it pretty similarly to you. We have the exact same order for this division. And in fact, I didn't know this, folks. We don't talk about this before the show for a reason, because we want to have the best conversations possible while we're on the show. I had the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Broncos. We have the same exact records for the Chargers, the Raiders, and the Broncos. I have a little bit different of a record for the Chiefs. I've got 13-4. You got them at 15-2. But look, the thing that I want to point out here is I believe in the Los Angeles Chargers. Maybe not enough for them to make the playoffs, but look, we talk about this all the time in sports. You know, like quarterback wins, it's not a thing. It's not a real stat. Head coach wins are a real thing. I fully believe that. Jim Harbaugh was a winner when he was the head coach at Stanford. He was a winner when he was the head coach with the San Francisco 49ers. He was a winner with Michigan, and he's going to be a winner with the Los Angeles Chargers. It's his second stint in the NFL now as a head coach. He is going to be able to have that team playing really, really well, even though the Chargers are rebuilding in a lot of ways. So I have them at 7-10. I was tempted to make the record even better for them, but it's a tougher division. We know the division games are hard, no matter how kind of like down the teams are. So, you know, the Raiders and the Broncos, where it might be sort of easier for other opponents, it's not going to be easy for the divisional opponents. It never is, but I think that's going to be a team that's going to surprise a lot of people. I sort of see the Raiders the same way, although I have a little bit more complimentary things to say about their defensive side of the ball that we'll get to in a little bit. Broncos, I just still think it's a lot of rebuilding, right? You knew it was going to happen when you were moving on from Russell Wilson. You were taking all that dead cap. You were drafting Bo Nix in the first round. Like, we understand what the plan is here. I just don't know how great that's going to be, but we'll dig into the Broncos a little bit deeper later in the show. Let's get to the Kansas City Chiefs, though. So you have 15-2. It's almost this damn near perfect season, Dalton. So obviously you are all in on the Chiefs being the back-to-back Super Bowl champs and making an even better run at the Super Bowl this year. Where do you have their season ending? Is it in fact the Super Bowl, and do you have them completing the three-peat?
I have them in the Super Bowl, but I do not have them pulling off the three-peat. I think we will see them upset. We won't see a three-peat. We'll get into the full prediction of who on the other side I think can and I think will beat them, but I do have them in the Super Bowl. I have them winning the AFC. And again, this just feels so much like New England for all those years. You have Patrick Mahomes, unquestioned best quarterback in football. I don't really understand the NFL top 100 having Lamar ahead of them. That's another argument. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. That's not a question. Okay. You've got arguably the best head coach in football, especially now that Bill Belichick's retired and Andy Reid. I think you have the best defensive play caller in football in Steve Spagnuolo. Then he might be. You have all this other stuff too, man. You have the best interior three on the offensive line in the NFL. That's supported with the grades. Chris Jones, future Hall of Famer. Playmakers at all three levels of the defense. Nick Bolton, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis emerging off of the edge. Now we added Xavier Worthy at receiver to add that speed element that we didn't have the last 2 years, but it really didn't matter the last 2 years. We won 2 Super Bowls without it. So when you talk about Patrick Mahomes, I think it's weird in a way because everyone thought the sky was falling when Tyreek Hill left, right? And what it actually did took a little bit of an adjustment, probably 7 or 8 weeks. It made him a better quarterback. You see him now, and he's winning in the short game. He's winning in the intermediate. And we always see the improvised stuff and the fun stuff from Mahomes. And now we're getting behind the back passes in games because, of course, we are, right? But he won.
It was only a matter of time. It was truly only a matter of time.
Yeah, and he won by just becoming a better quarterback in the same way that Tom Brady used to be, right? And I believe it was the Super Bowl against the Eagles 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure, unless the Kelsey touchdown counted, it was right on the border. I don't think he completed a single deep ball in that game. And they found a way to win it anyway. So you're just talking about a guy who's made the adjustment, and for as much as he can do physically, mentally, he's a football savant too now. It's crazy what Andy Reid has done with his development, and he's so clearly the best quarterback in football. Just like Brady and Belichick, as long as you have Mahomes and Reid, you're in the Super Bowl mix. I don't care what's around you.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. Mahomes is the best player in all of football, and he's playing at the highest level that you could play the quarterback position at, which is truly remarkable to say. You mentioned the lack of just overall deep passes from him was lacking from last year's Chiefs team, and I think people looked at this offseason and were wondering how much they were going to address it. They bring in Hollywood Brown, they draft Xavier Worthy. Obviously, it's a big deal for them. So I think you're going to see more verticality from their offense this year. I don't think that they're going to be that's going to be the bread and butter of their offense, but I think it's going to be more of a factor. The average depth of target, the attempted passes of 20 yards or more, that is going to be higher for this team. And I think that is probably a reason why people might agree with you, maybe not quite 15 wins, but people could agree with you that, hey, this is an even better Chiefs team than the one that we saw last year that won the Super Bowl. I think that's a big reason why. Who do you have as the offensive MVP for this team? Obviously, we both know that Mahomes is the default player here, but is there somebody other than Mahomes who you think can bring a lot of value to this team and a lot kind of rides on their shoulders?
Absolutely, and a guy who's already done it for 3 years and just got himself a big-time contract extension. Let me go to the center position with Creed Humphrey, a fourth-year man out of Oklahoma now. Look, since he came in the league in 2021, highest overall grade among centers, highest run-blocking grade among centers, and the Chiefs last year had the highest graded interior offensive line centers and their 2 guards. Look, this interior, Humphrey and Trey Smith and Joe Tooney, it's as good as it gets. But Humphrey, he's just incredible. I think the only other guy, now that Jason Kelsey's retired, you talk about, I think, Creed Humphrey and probably Frank Ragnow as the 2 guys who are like, okay, that's your argument for the best center in football. I don't think it gets said enough. Again, the drafting of Humphrey and Smith after they lost the Super Bowl to Tampa Bay when the pressure rate was off the chart. I don't think they had a single healthy starting offensive lineman in that game. They rebuilt the entire offensive line in one offseason, and a big part of that was drafting Humphrey in the 2nd round and Trey Smith, I believe, in the 5th round. But Humphrey, I think
6th actually.
Was it the 6th? I know it was late, and he became an immediate starter. Andy Reid was brave enough to put him in there immediately, and Humphrey in there immediately, and they've both been fantastic. But Humphrey, I think there's an easy argument to say he's the best center in football now, especially now that Jason Kelsey's retired. It's just the value in having a guy like that, especially, and veteran quarterbacks can check protections and do all those things too and make the calls. But the value in having a Creed Humphrey who can do that and just allow Mahomes to look at coverage and he can just trust the line to do what they do, even with the shaky tackle situation that they had last year and could have this year, those interior 3 make life so much easier. But it starts with Humphrey. He deserves every penny of that new contract that he just got.
Yeah, look, I'm going to stick along the offensive line for my MVPs, and I am going to talk about those offensive tackles. Right, last year you win the Super Bowl. Jawan Taylor's your right tackle. Donovan Smith is your left tackle, and obviously it won you a Super Bowl. So yeah, I guess it couldn't have been the worst thing in the world, but I feel like upgrades were needed, or at least better play was needed. Donovan Smith no longer there. They draft Kingsley Suamataia from BYU. He's now going to step in as the left tackle there. And when you look at the offensive tackle performance for Kansas City last year, both offensive tackles, both those guys, Smith and Taylor, below a 60.0 overall grade as blockers last season. So it has to be better. Suamataia, even as just a rookie, 71.2 overall grade on 30 snaps this preseason. It looks like he is ready to at least take on that challenge for one of those starting offensive tackle spots. I think that if we get to the end of the year and if I think the Chiefs are hoisting the Super Bowl again as three-time champions, you're gonna get some questions afterwards, like, hey, to Andy Reid or anybody in the coaching staff, who are some of the guys who made this all possible. And obviously, if they get to that point, Mahomes and Kelsey and Pacheco and some of the wide receivers, they're going to get a lot of the names in the media anyways. But I think you're going to hear a lot of these coaches, if they get to that point and they're able to achieve their goal, they're going to talk about these offensive tackles. They're going to have to. They're going to talk about the job that Jawan Taylor did this upcoming year. They're going to talk about how Kingsley Suamataia was able to play so well at offensive tackle as a rookie. So to me, they both of those guys just bring so much value to a team that we already know is good at so many other spots. This is one of the places that could potentially let them down when it comes to capturing that third Lombardi trophy in a row. And so I'm looking at the offensive tackles as a valuable piece this year. What about defensive MVP for this team?
There's several good candidates here. This is a really good defense. I think sometimes people still underrate this defense. And the guy that you have coming up is one of my favorite players in football, but I have to go with the future, probably first ballot Hall of Famer at defensive tackle, big 95 Chris Jones, man.
Feels like, yeah.
We saw when he held out the first game the impact that it had on their defense, and he's just one of the all-timers, and he's one of the PFF all-timers, man. Second best pass rush grade for his career ever in PFF history by a defensive tackle, of course only behind Aaron Donald. And then you look at the grading and what he does, not just in the regular season, but what he does at the highest level against the best teams in the postseason. A 90.5 overall grade in his career in the postseason, Trevor, and in his 4 Super Bowls, an 84.6 overall grade across those 4. The only game that he didn't play as well as the other 3 was a game against Philadelphia 2 years ago, and that was the best offensive line in football. You're talking about Chris Jones against Jason Kelsey, and we're going to look back on matchups like that and go, wow, we really got to see that. But Chris Jones' impact, I mean, enough has been said about it. Enough gets said about it every single week. But one of the best pass rushers in the league still. Solid against the run still, even as he's getting older. Just one of the best defensive tackles, honestly. I think it has to be said more often. One of the best defensive tackles we've ever seen of this generation, of any generation. Honestly, when you look at what he's done for this team, 3 rings, could be looking at a 4th one, went to a 4th one, obviously, that they lost to Tampa Bay. He's one of the great defensive tackles, defensive players ever. I mean, it's on that level. This isn't just in the league today. This is of all time. You could probably make a top 10 defensive tackles list ever and have Chris Jones on it. I'm going with him as the MVP. Their defense does look a lot different when he isn't on the field, but he's still just such a freak of nature, man.
What he does up front allows Steve Spagnuolo to sort of have the ultimate creativity and aggressiveness that we see in a lot of different other angles. It really starts with that player who's in the middle of the defense, and it's such a joy when you get a combination of an extremely talented football player with an extremely creative, understanding, and brilliant defensive coach like Spagnuolo is. So I just love the fact that we have this combination. I'll say the same thing about my defensive MVP. I already expect Chris Jones to be a monster once again, but the year that Trent McDuffie could have as this team's CB1, now that L'Jarius Sneed is gone, it could rightfully put his name into the conversation of some of the top cornerbacks in the league, and I think that it absolutely will. When you look at how McDuffie has been utilized and aligned in the secondary over his 2 years in the NFL now, in his rookie season, he played 542 snaps at wide corner, 255 as a slot corner. So he played mostly on the outside. Last year, it flipped. 372 total snaps at wide corner, 626 in the slot. So this is somebody who has complete versatility. For you to be a cornerback and have this many snaps at wide corner and slot corner shows the trust that your defensive coordinator has in you. And I think that the talent, the football IQ, and just everything that Trent McDuffie brings to the table is a reason why you even think that a player like L'Jarius Sneed is movable right in the middle of a three-peat window that they have. To me, that when I saw that L'Jarius Sneed got traded, my immediate thought was, holy cow, they believe in Trent McDuffie a lot. And they should, right? I think he has given them reason to believe in him with such strength, with him being their CB1 now. So I think that was the beginning of sort of the praise that they had for him. And again, somebody who, if they end up winning the Super Bowl once again, they're going to continually talk about Trent McDuffie as a big reason why, for so many reasons. What about a breakout player here for Kansas City?
I think the transition from McDuffie to my breakout player here is perfect. I'm gonna roll it back to 2022 for a second with Trent McDuffie. And look, 2 years in a row, what we've seen is a player enter the Chiefs secondary, and then they got hot and they were an elite coverage unit and they won a Super Bowl, right? And McDuffie early in his rookie year, he played the first game, pulled his hamstring the first week of his rookie year, missed the rest of like 2 months he missed, like 7 or 8 weeks, right? Came back in week 9, and from week 9 through the Super Bowl, Chiefs, they were struggling in coverage before that. Chiefs had the best coverage grade in the league in 2022 from week 9 when McDuffie came back into the lineup from the hamstring. Secondary was elite, won the Super Bowl. Similar thing happened this year with a different player. Now, you remember the Chiefs losing on Sunday Night Football to the Packers, right? And Jordan Love teed off on them, and they were struggling in coverage. And something that happened in the fourth quarter of that game was Brian Cook went out with I believe it was a knee injury, and he suffered like a season-ending injury late in that game, right? And they needed someone to fill that kind of like weird hybrid safety slot sort of like just versatile role, like kind of that do-everything role back there, as Justin Reed usually roves on the back end by himself, and then they have another guy. So Brian Cook gets hurt. And a fourth-round pick that, honestly, before he got drafted, I'd never heard of, Shamari Connor from Virginia, comes in. And he just immediately, he fills that role. In the slot, blowing up screens, making tackles, playing deep half, doing all these things. So what happens is, I believe it's week 13 or 14, week 14 onward, okay? Shamari Connor from week 14 to the Super Bowl. Before that, he was playing like 8 snaps a game, Trevor. He was hardly playing at all. He was playing special teams. Comes in, 80.3 overall grade, which I believe was the 6th best among all safeties in that stretch. Their team coverage grade went from 22nd in the first 13 weeks all the way to 4th when Connor was in the lineup. It's second straight year. I'd never seen anything like this. Second straight year, a young player enters their secondary and immediately flips the whole thing around. He just allowed everyone else to move around and play their role. And I'll tell you what, don't throw a screen to Shamari Connor's side of the field. Just don't do it. He is going to light whoever your 5'11", 180-pound slot receiver is, he's going to light him up. But the one thing you saw from him at Virginia, he wasn't real polished, but he was versatile. He could play everywhere, and that's exactly what Steve Spagnuolo did with him. He just allowed him to be versatile. Sometimes he was in a deep half. Sometimes he's in the slot. Sometimes he's down as that extra linebacker in the run game, and he did such a great job. There was a mini breakout for about 8-9 weeks last year. I think Shamari Connor is a huge part of this defense now. Him establishing himself in the postseason against teams like the Bills and the Ravens and in the 49ers. I mean, you're talking about the elite teams in football, the elite offenses in football, and he comes in here seamlessly as a day 3 rookie and just grabs a hold of the job, and I would think he's going to keep it. Now, I know that's the one thing you have to love about this Kansas City secondary. Not just stars like McDuffie, right, but they have so much depth, and Connor's a big piece of that. I think he's going to be a huge piece moving forward. They found a real gem late in the year last year, really by pure luck. It's obviously unfortunate when anybody gets hurt. You know, you feel for Brian Cook. You hope he recovers fully and comes back, but what Shamari Connor did in that role really was a big part of what spurred them toward another Super Bowl, just like McDuffie did the year before.
Dude, that is a deep pull. That is awesome. That was fantastic. I didn't know any of that. That was great. That was the fact that you were able to pull all those numbers on Connor. Like, that's the stuff that I love about what we have here at PFF, being able to recognize that kind of stuff and hopefully give credit where it is due, which you absolutely did there with Connor. I love that. My breakout player, I'm gonna stay in the secondary. I'm gonna go with Joshua Williams, right? Because with the departure of L'Jarius Sneed, I think that Trent McDuffie is now elevated to that CB1 spot, but people gotta then be elevated behind him, right? You gotta step up in a lot of different areas. I like Joshua Williams, man. I liked him in the draft. I was very intrigued by his size, his length, the speed combination rotation that he had as well. And he's been a little bit up and down, but I think he is ready to take a more full-time cornerback role. 75.2 coverage grade last season, earned a 78.9 coverage grade this preseason on 34 snaps. I just like that L'Jarius Sneed could really be, and I say this as the biggest compliment in the world, very annoying as a cornerback, right? He was just very annoying for wide receivers to get around. I feel like I see some of that similar play when I watch Joshua Williams. So we'll see how much he gets into that full rotation there in the secondary, but we know they like to keep those guys rotated as well, and you got to keep defensive backs pretty deep. And I think that Kansas City's got some good ones. I'm going to shout out Joshua Williams. If he gets the snaps this year, I think that he's going to make the most of them. What about the rookie? Who do you guys are rookie for this team that you really love?
I have to go with the first round pick they traded up for in Xavier Worthy. I think the dimension that his speed. Now, again, I don't know that he'll lead the team in catches, and now they just re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster because New England cut him, and they brought him back from the 22 Super Bowl run. So I guess Smith-Schuster wanted to get in on the three-peat, right? But Worthy, the speed, the 4.2 speed is just what this offense needed, right? They really, really struggled to just find vertical plays, find deep passing plays, right, in this offense last year. And you know, I wasn't always convinced. Obviously, Worthy is small. He's got to work on getting off of press coverage. But I think the one thing that I saw in the one preseason game that he did play, actually the second preseason game, I should say, he played where he scored the touchdown, had a couple of big plays, is Andy Reid's going to have him in motion a lot, and when you have guys in motion, it's very hard to press them and get off, because especially if they're in a dead sprint or what have you. But I think he's going to have Worthy moving all around formations, and we can see, even if it's for and jet sweeps too is going to be a big thing with it. I mean, he's going to get used in several different ways. I think kind of the idea that they wanted to have with Kadarius Toney, who they now cut, I think they're going to try that now with Worthy. But that's a big thing I'm looking for, is Worthy being in motion and making explosive plays, coming in and out of motion. You might not see him get the highest volume. Andy Reid doesn't have a history of trusting rookie receivers a lot, but even whether it be as a decoy to just keep everybody in too high constantly, because we know this offense still wants to run the ball with Pacheco too, right? Worthy is going to have 4 or 5 plays a game where he really makes an impact. And honestly, with his speed, almost like a Brandon Cooks type of player, it could be 4 or 5 plays that get you 130 yards. He could just take off on you. I think that's a big thing I'm looking for. Xavier Worthy and ways to keep him out of press coverage in motion. I think you're going to see it a lot. I think in the past, Tyreek Hill was that guy. He's still that guy from Miami. He's just constantly in motion. You don't know where he is. He's in the slot. He's outside. He's moving. He's coming on the jet. I think Worthy's going to have a similar, maybe not a similar impact to Tyreek Hill, because it even took Tyreek Hill time, right? He was a late round pick, and it took him time to work into the rotation. But I do think the speed, Andy Reid's going to find every way to use that 4.2 speed.
So I'm gonna switch sides. I'm gonna go to defense side of the football for my rookie. I want to talk about Jaden Hicks, and the reason why is because we've praised Steve Spagnuolo for the creativity that he has in his defense. I think one way that he is creative as defense coordinator is he's not afraid to get multiple safeties in the mix. And when I say that, I don't just mean 2 safeties, I mean 3 safeties as well. Chiefs were 6th in the NFL in 3 safety sets last year. I think it's something that they're very comfortable going to, especially when they have a number of players that they are comfortable doing so with. Hicks is somebody that I liked out of Washington State last year, who was I believe my safety 2 behind Tyler Nubin last year. And the reason why isn't because he's, a freak athlete or this crazy strong enforcer over the middle. It's because of his football IQ, his communication, how he recognized things both pre and post snap. And you got to be a smart football player to get on the field early in Steve Spagnuolo's defense. And I think that Jaden Hicks absolutely is. So I feel as though who he is as a player and his high football IQ will allow them to continue to be multiple in ways that they have shown they want to be multiple before. And it is getting to those 3 safety sets and making sure that offenses don't exactly know who's dropping back, who's coming towards the box, who maybe might be coming off the edge, all of that. Anytime you can be more versatile, defensive coordinators are going to lean into that. And I think Jaden Hicks gives them that ability and will be able to do so even as a rookie this year. Let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers. I've got them going 7-10, missing the playoffs. Seems you have them 7-10 going and missing the playoffs as well. What do you think about this team overall? How excited are you, or not excited for you? I'll leave the door open both ways for the Harbaugh era. What can we expect in year 1? And then let's dig into a little offensive MVP before we get to defensive MVP.
I think anytime Jim Harbaugh is in the building, you have to be excited, right? And
I agree completely.
I think the one thing that you look at, and look, we try to find tangible things here and player evals and grading and all the trends and all this stuff, but some guys are just winners, right? And the one thing where I'm a little tepid when it comes to like this record that I picked for him. Since 2009, at any of his stops, Stanford, San Fran, Michigan, wherever, since 2009, the only losing season he had was 2020, a year that was shortened for college football with COVID, obviously, and he went 2-4. So he has not had a full losing season at any level since 2008 at Stanford. Okay, this guy just wins. He just finds ways to win. And look, I think everybody, and we said it a lot last year, and we say it now, the Chargers have talent. They have talent. They have big name talent, right? Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater, Asante Samuel. Like, there's really good, Derwin James. There's a lot of really good players on this team, and there was too often, especially in situational football, they just didn't play fundamentally sound football. And if there's one thing that all of Jim Harbaugh's teams do, it's just play fundamentally sound football. And they almost punch above their weight class at times, right? You know, I think the 49ers back in the day, right when he stepped in, he walked in there and said, this team's got talent. Look at this team. They've got Vernon Davis. They've got Justin Smith. We're drafting guys. We got Patrick Willis. We got Hall of Fame players on this team, and we just don't play good enough football yet. We have to change that. I think you have a similar dynamic here with the Chargers where they just have to walk in there and play better football. And the one big luxury is you've got a borderline elite quarterback still. You talk all you want about Justin Herbert. He's great. I don't care. Like, even last year, in a year that the Chargers were having, still 10th in the league in passing grade at an 83.1. Still a top 10 quarterback when they were a disaster outside of Keenan Allen at receiver. They were a disaster in the run game. All of the vibes straight up were just off, right? I mean, Brandon Staley the year before with the game in Jacksonville, and it was all off. And Herbert was still a top 10 passer in the league. And a guy, I don't know if this is said enough because everybody thinks about, the big arm and all the things and how we're overrating Justin Herbert's just all physical skill. He has the best turnover-worthy play rate in PFF history. He's the only one better than Tom Brady, 1.9%. So he doesn't turn the ball over. He can make any throw on the field at any time. He can run. He plays injured until he absolutely can't. Like, if you think Justin Herbert is the problem with this team, I'm not sure what you're looking at. Honestly, they just need all the way around him. They just need to play better, and they should have a good offensive line. You added Joe Alt. They have to figure it out at receiver for sure. That's the thing. They're really young at receiver. They're hoping McConkey and Quentin Johnston and those guys get it together. But Justin Herbert's not the problem, and I can guarantee you Jim Harbaugh's not going to be the problem either.
No, I agree with you on both fronts. My offensive MVP, it has to be Justin Herbert as well. I hate to just be chalk here, but it's a running back room with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I don't know how long that those guys are going to be around, after this year. I think they're going to be really serviceable rotational backs, and maybe one of them really catches fire and that gets to be the running back of the future, but I don't think they're going to lean on them entirely. Nobody really from the tight end group, who I think is a big X factor there. Contributors, but big X factor, no. Wide receiver, you mentioned. I got a lot of hope for Ladd McConkey. If he has a fully healthy season, I think he can have a really good year. Quentin Johnston, I'm starting to lose the faith in, right? I mean, like, we really need to see it from him this year, and he needs to step up to be much better than he has been in the past. He has all the opportunity in the world to basically be the wide receiver one on this team this upcoming season, and if he is not able to do that, then I think you're desperately looking at a receiver in next year's draft. I love the fact that they drafted Joe Alt. I love the fact that they've got the bookend offensive tackles. You can, if you need to fix the interior offensive line over the next 2 years, Jim Harbaugh is going to be able to do it like he did with Michigan's offensive line, making it one of the best in the country over back-to-back seasons, including the last national championship year, where a lot of what you attribute their success on offense to is predicated on how good that offensive line was. So I'm not worried about this team at all whatsoever long-term, but there's no doubt about it. The offensive MVP for this year is going to be Justin Herbert. I'm glad that you threw out the turnover-worthy play rate, how good he is at taking care of the football despite having a massive arm, because we see that all the time. A lot of quarterbacks with these big arms that get carried away. They think they can make every single throw. They're a little too fearless. They've got that Superman complex to them, and they have a lot of turnover-worthy plays to go along with the big-time throws. But last year, you saw a much higher big-time throw percentage, the highest big-time throw percentage of Herbert's career at 5.0%, and the turnover-worthy play rate was still relatively low. Now, it was a little bit higher, but it's because he's pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. So the the big time throw rate took a major jump, and the turnover worthy play rate, it went up a little naturally, but not any more than it had to naturally for him pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. So excited to see Justin Herbert this year in a Jim Harbaugh offense, and excited to continue to see that moving forward. What about a defensive MVP here for the Chargers?
There was a couple really good choices, I think, and boy, what Khalil Mack can still do at his age is incredible. First of all, I almost went I almost went with Alohi Gilman, and he got a contract extension he deserved. Almost went there. I wanted to. I almost think I should have, but I'm going with a guy that they need to bounce back, and that's Derwin James. They have the potential, if Derwin James does bounce back from some struggles last year, especially in coverage, that could be the best pair of safeties in football. Gilman's a really, really good player back there, and James, we already know what James can do. Look, from 2018 to 2022, and I know there's some injuries mixed in there, but he had the third best overall grade among all safeties. I mean, he's an elite player. One of the rare players. I think about him, and I think about Antoine Winfield Jr. for the Bucs, who I go, run D, check, coverage, check, blitzer, check. Very few guys, very few can do all three. And Derwin James, when he's on, has the ability to do all three when he is 100% healthy and when he's really rolling. I'm so curious where Jesse Minter is going to use these guys, man, because Minter gives so many looks. They rotate coverages. They ran a lot of single high at Michigan. I wonder which one of Gilman or James or both are going to be sniffing around the box a little bit, playing the run. Who's blitzing? He's got it's such a fun thing for me with this. There is talent on this defense. There's so much more talent on this defense than the way they've played the last couple of years. When you talk about these two safeties, Asante Samuel, they have to figure some things out at linebacker. Mack and Bosa, that's still Mack and Bosa, man. You can't underestimate that either. But I think it's going to be fascinating to watch how Jesse Minter uses these two safeties. And if Derwin James gets back to that elite level, it changes the entire way this defense operates.
Look, he's got to stay healthy, and I think that that's a major point of emphasis for Derwin James, but there's no question he has to play better. He is still, I believe, one of the most talented secondary players, overall defensive players that we have in the league, and last year the numbers just absolutely did not reflect that. Derwin James last year, 60.1 overall grade last season. That's almost unthinkable. 57.0 coverage grade, by far the lowest of his career. Jesse Minter is a guy who I have a lot of faith in as a defensive coordinator coming over with Harbaugh from Michigan. And you look at how Michigan certainly played even just last year. I mean, flying around, like getting the most out of so many different players. I think the emphasis on this defense has to be on maximizing Derwin James, not only having him bounce back, but also having him be a key part of what this defense is all about. I'm very excited to see it, but there's no doubt about it. He has to play better. Whether or not the Chargers have a playoff caliber defense or not, to me, depends on Derwin James. It depends on how he plays, because you mentioned they're going to get production out of their edge rushers. I think Mack, Bosa, they're going to get production out of those guys. I'm going to mention somebody at the second level who I think is going to take a step up here. You know, corners is something that they're obviously figuring out, but I think that they could be good enough there if Derwin James is playing like the player that quarterbacks have to break the huddle and go, where is he? What is he doing? Where is Derwin James on the field? Because that's how it used to be. And I think that's how it can still be here in Jesse Minter's defense. And I think that he needs a big bounce back year from what was a down year in basically every single way last season. What about a breakout player? Who you got breaking out on this team?
I think a guy that Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter are going to love is one of the best rookie edge players that we saw in football last year. And because of the way the Chargers season went, we didn't get to talk about him a lot. That's Tuli Tuipulotu off the edge for them out of USC. Went right down the street and just immediately started playing great for the Chargers last year. I think that's going to continue. An 88.4 run defense grade as a rookie. The only three edge players in the NFL better than that: Max Crosby, DeMarcus Lawrence, and his teammate Khalil Mack. They were the only ones. He was the fourth in the NFL in run defense grade among edges, and added 51 pressures. The only rookie edge player who had more than that was Will Anderson, the third overall pick. So you're talking about a guy who really quietly, playing as their third defensive end behind Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, earned extensive playing time, played hard as hell in the run game. 51 pressures is a really good number for a rookie. This is a guy who might be an emerging star. And I know Khalil Mack's getting a little older, but he's still playing at an elite level. But Tuipulotu is a guy who they can take into the long-term future, right? As Harbaugh and Minter are trying to rebuild this defense, and it's a veteran defense at a lot of spots, especially on the D-line. Tuipulotu is a foundational piece, and he proved that last year. He's going to continue to prove it this year. I think the pass rush numbers are going to increase this year. I think the pass rush grade is going to increase this year. I believe it's in the mid-high 60s last year. I think this is a guy who's going to be a star going forward, and a lot more people are going to know about by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out, because even if you're out there and you're saying, well, Bosa and Khalil Mack, they're not the same as what they used to be. I mean, Tuipulotu is a really good guy to just like have in there and try to pick up some of that those guys might maybe not they're not the elite players that they have been in their past. I'm more thinking about Joey Bosa because Khalil Mack was fantastic last year, but Tuipulotu, he can pick up the pieces, if you will. He can really complement them as a three-headed edge rush group there with the Chargers. I'm going to go with Diane Henley, the now second-year linebacker for the Los Angeles Chargers. I feel like linebacker has, for a while, sort of been just this area of the Chargers defense that not a lot of people loved. It was Kenneth Murray who was there, and there were some question marks with him, whether he was all athlete and didn't get enough production. Now he's no longer there, but you look at this room, and it's Henley who I think has the athleticism to really bounce back this year and play really well. He had a pretty solid coverage grade last season. I think it's only going to be even better this year as one of the better athletes at the linebacker position that we saw in the 2023 NFL draft. But you also bring in a veteran like Denzel Perryman, who I think is kind of your mainstay as your like Mike linebacker or inside linebacker. And then they drafted Junior Colson as well, who was a very productive player for Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last year and was sort of a centerpiece of that fantastic defense that they had there. So with Colson being a rookie, you're kind of easing him into it a little bit. That's why I love the fact that Perryman is there, because moving forward, if Henley takes that next step as your like in-space linebacker, your will linebacker, somebody who could roam around and play man coverage against tight ends and really give you a lot of range and coverage over the middle of the field, you got Colson who's developing as well. That's a really great young linebacker duo moving forward for Minter and that defense. And so I think that Henley taking that next step to be one of the better coverage linebackers in the league, like his athleticism hints that he can be, that's going to be a first step, if you will, towards establishing a great young linebacker duo with him and Colson for the future. But what about a rookie this year specifically? It might be Colson, but it might be somebody else who you got on this team that you want to shout out as a rookie.
I almost went with Ladd McConkey, but I just couldn't do it. I think McConkey's going to have a nice year, but I have to go with their new right tackle, Joe Alt from Notre Dame. Honestly, Trev, I thought he was the safest pick in this entire draft. I thought he was the safest prospect. I thought he had the highest floor, and in the FBS over the last 3 years, he was the highest graded offensive tackle at either left or right tackle. He's just so fundamentally sound, and I really like. I heard a comp to a guy we're going to talk about later in Colton Miller. He's tall for sure. Did he measure in at 6'8"? It was 6'8.5", somewhere around there. I mean, but he's just so sound. I mean, there's everything about him: zone run, gap run, pass protection. There's just. I don't know what there is not to like about Joe Alt, and the position switch from what I've seen in the preseason appears to be handling it very, very well, right? He played left tackle all 3 years at Notre Dame. This guy, I think it was such, their entire draft, it was such a Jim Harbaugh draft. And they've taken an offensive lineman in 3 of the past 4 first rounds, right? When you talk about Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, and now Joe Alt completing that mix on the other side. If Alt is what we think he's going to be, this is one of the best pair, if not the best pair of tackles in the league, right? As long as Slater is healthy and Alt pans out. I just think it's so hard not to look at Joe Alt and go, and I know there was a huge debate about, do they go Joe Alt, do they go Malik Neighbors or something like that? And I go, there really is no wrong answer with 2 players that talented, and it's such a Jim Harbaugh thing to take an offensive lineman, but it's hard to call them wrong for it, right? It reminded me so much of the Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase debate we had with the Bengals back in the day, or was it the Bengals or the Lions went first? I can't remember which one went. I think the Bengals went first, right?
No, the Bengals went first. Yeah,
when they took Chase, and look, I don't think there's a wrong pick when you're talking about 2 guys that talented, and the Lions get Sewell, who might be the best tackle in the league. So the Chargers are hoping for a similar result. I think he's going to be really good, and I think he's at least going to be stable on that right side immediately for them.
You know, we had so many debates, like you mentioned, over who the Chargers were going to pick, and it was so fun to think about, like Malik Neighbors in this offense with Justin Herbert as his quarterback. But maybe there's been some quotes or some press conferences where Harbaugh has said the opposite. But I can't help but think that they probably all got in a room together and they're like, Well, yeah. Why wouldn't we take Joe Alt? You mentioned like safest player in the draft. You absolutely nail it. You're coming in as a first-time head coach, and you get the chance to draft a player like Joe Alt. Jim Harbaugh, who has done this before, right? He's been a head coach before, so he's gone through the draft game and everything. And he was probably like, This is not a debate. Like, I'm not worried at all whatsoever about Joe Alt being a all-pro offensive tackle for a long, long time in this league. 76.2 preseason grade this year on 55 snaps at an unfamiliar position with him going to right tackle because Rashawn Slater is playing that left tackle spot. So flipping to the other side of the line of scrimmage, you mentioned it there, but the preseason grade checks out that he does not look super uncomfortable or overwhelmed, because if he did, that preseason grade would be a lot lower because he'd be giving up some reps. There would be sometimes some snaps where he just doesn't have his hand timed out right because you're kicking with the wrong foot, if you will, with him switching from being a left tackle to a right tackle. But those snaps really didn't exist, and I think that his grade reflects that. So I've got Joe Alt as well. I'm just very excited to watch the Chargers this season. It's going to be fun, and I'm glad that Harbaugh is back in the NFL, because I think that he's just straight up one of the best football coaches that we have in this great sport. Hey, we had the appetizer last week with college football. Now it's time to feast. College football is back. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. Full slate of games this week, including major matchup that we got in Atlanta between the preseason number 1 and number 16 as well. I know my Gators got a big matchup as well in the middle of the day. It's going to be an exciting week. This is the kind of college football matchup where it's like, hey, you're sitting on the couch at noon and you're not getting up until midnight or maybe even later. DraftKings is the number 1 place to bet on touchdown. They currently have the most touchdown markets offered and leads in touchdown futures with season specials too. Touchdowns can be scored on the ground, through the air, defensive effort. You guys know all the ways and methods that teams can win with it. Now you can win with it as well. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded college football playoff. Plus, the newbies out there, you can get in the college football spirit as well. Something a little extra for you. New DraftKings customers can bet just $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. You can score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now using the promo code PFF. That is PFF for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY, or you could just text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems with gambling by calling 888-789-7777 or visiting ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, visit dkng.co/FTBAL. This show is also sponsored by our friends over at BetterHelp. In today's very hectic world, it is easy to focus on everything except for yourself and your own mental health. Sometimes you need a little bit of help to make sure that that part of your life stays on track as well. Therapy can be a really useful part or a useful way to get a better understanding of how your mind actually works. You become more aware of your own patterns, your behavior, how to improve them. It is useful for everybody, not just people struggling with something specific. I've said this before on the show, but I've been doing therapy for over a year and a half now. And I said it initially was something that I needed help kind of getting through something. And really since then, it's become something that I've used just as self-improvement and self-check-ins. I go every other week and it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed understanding parts of kind of how my mind works and my family background and kind of just how I'm wired the way that I'm wired. And it's allowed me to be a more confident me. It's allowed me to be better for the people around me as well. I cannot recommend it enough. If you guys are thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is convenient, flexible, and entirely online way to get therapy that is right for you. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist right there, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/PFF to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. All right. Las Vegas Raiders. They are next because we have the exact same record prediction for this team. 5-12 for the Raiders. Might seem a little bit harsh. Sure, Walt's in the chat, not happy about this one with this team finishing with only 5 wins, missing out on the playoffs. What do you think about the Raiders situation? Were you tempted to go higher with the win total? Are we being too big of haters here with the Raiders? And then give me the offensive MVP that you think could mean a lot to this team.
So they could definitely have a couple more wins in this because their defense, once Antonio Pierce took over, the defense played a lot better. We'll get into that for a minute. I do worry about this quarterback situation and some of the reports coming out of Vegas with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell have not been real positive throughout the preseason. Minshew's going to start. I know he played reasonably well for the Colts last year, but some of the under the hood numbers kind of portray more of a gunslinger, kind of a high turnover worthy play rate. Like there's some things in there that concern me with both of them, with Minshew and O'Connell, and it reminds me a bit of when we walked into with the Atlanta Falcons season last year, and it was like, okay, we have a really good O-line, and we just drafted Bijan Robinson. We have Drake London. We have Kyle Pitts. We got Jesse Bates in free agency. We're starting to roll on defense. We have Calais. But we have Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. And it feels a little bit like, to me, we have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. And in a scheme, now Minshew's away from Shane Steichen because he was with Shane Steichen in Philly when he was the backup, and I believe won a big game or two for them. He was with Shane Steichen last year with the Colts when they darn near won the division, but now he's away from that environment, right? So not as easy. Now you're going to Luke Getsy, who obviously there was struggles over there with the Bears and Justin Fields and all of that. How does the quarterback and offensive coordinator situation really pan out for this team? Now, offensive MVP, there is a guy they can rely on every week, every year, all the time. I think the most underappreciated tackle in the league, Trevor, and that's Colton Miller at left tackle for them. This guy, he just shows up every year, every week and every year, just so consistent, right? And I think when we talk about the elite tackles, right, the Trent Williams and the Penei Sewells and the Tristan Wirfs and Lane Johnsons and all these guys, I don't think we give Colton Miller enough credit. Last year, an 80.2 overall grade, 11th best among all tackles, right? And since 2020, an 87.1 pass pro grade, right? The only left tackles better than that: David Bakhtiari, Laramie Tunsil, Andrew Whitworth, who's not even playing anymore, and Trent Williams. You're talking about this guy, especially in pass protection, is among the elite players in football. Whoever's playing quarterback can at least sleep well at night knowing he's going to wake up on Sunday mornings and that day he's going to get protected by Colton Miller. Shocks me, absolutely shocks me that he hasn't made a Pro Bowl yet. It's unreal, and I know there's a ton of good offensive tackles in the league. Colton Miller, at some point, he's got to make at least one Pro Bowl. Please, someone vote for him, because this guy is as reliable as any tackle in the league on either side. He's an excellent pass protector. He's a solid run blocker. He just does everything so well. He's one of the few constants in their offense every single year, even though we talk about quarterbacks, and this year we talk about who's in their running back rotation and what's going on there, and is Devontae Adams going to get traded? I can tell you right now, Colton Miller is going to go out every week, and he's going to play really, really well, and he's still probably going to get underappreciated.
The crown jewel of Mike Mayock's time as general manager, right? Yeah. Or no, he was the year before, I think. Oh man, so Mayock doesn't even get credit.
I don't remember the timing. I'm
sorry, Mike. I just looked it up. I thought it started at 2018 because that was when Colton Miller got drafted. He was the 2018 draft, but Mayock was after in 2019. Sorry, Mike. I tried to give you some credit there, but to no avail. I think that Colton Miller's fantastic. I think it's a really good shout out by you. Obviously, how the quarterbacks play, a major part of how well this team is going to play. I think that Zeus White, Zamir White, their running back, is also a major factor in how well this team is going to be able to play offense, because if they can't run the football well, that's the one thing that I'm really worried about with this defense. I think this defense could be really good in Las Vegas, but if you can't run the football and keep the defense off the field a little bit, well, then it's a numbers game at that point. There's too many good offenses in the NFL. You're going to see more points given up, more yards given up for as good as that unit is. You want to limit possessions, and the way that you did that is running the ball. So I think the running the ball matters a lot for this team. But in terms of an offensive MVP, a player that has a lot of value that I think could maybe swing our expectations of how good this offense can be is Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, 3 straight seasons at Georgia, the elite overall grades. He was the best tight end that we have seen in the country over the last couple of years. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Max has made the argument for Brock Bowers being the greatest college football tight end of all time because of how well he has been able to just hit the ground running when he was a true freshman, and obviously how dominant that he continued to be as a sophomore and a junior. So if Bowers, along with Michael Mayer, can make that one of the premium tight end rooms in the NFL and continue to hit the ground running, that's an X factor that could really swing things in favor for this team. I already know Devontae Adams is going to be good. I mentioned how pivotal the run game is, but to me, that who is most valuable to this team, if Brock Bowers can look anything like the Brock Bowers that we saw at Georgia sort of right off the bat, you've all of a sudden got a much more serviceable, much more maybe potent is the better word, offense than what it looks like on paper before the season is starting. So I'm going with Brock Bowers here, but what about your defensive MVP? Who you got defense here?
One other really quick thing on Bowers and the luxury of having Mayer there is big time for this, because Mayer is a very traditional throwback. Well, it's throwback Notre Dame tight ends that you could have in any decade we've ever seen football. But Bowers, the versatility is going to be a big thing. The one preseason game he did play, right? Played 11 snaps. He lined up at 9 different spots. I think that's the preview that you're going to get with Bowers, is he's going to be all over the place in the slot as an H-back sort of thing. He could line up out wide. He's that good. I think that's the one thing with Bowers too, is his level of versatility is going to be crucial to their offense. Defensive MVP, look, there's some good players on this defense, and some good players that got a lot better on this defense late in the year after Pierce took over. But Max Crosby's the dude. That's just not. It's just he's so. We're watching. You know what's funny to me? I'm looking at Max Crosby numbers, and I'm obviously we see him every week, and we see him in the highlights every week, and it feels like he's been around forever, doesn't it? It
does.
I don't know why. It feels like I've been watching Max Crosby play football for like 15 years, and then I look up, he just turned 27 last week.
That's actually pretty surprising. I would have guessed 29. I would have confidently guessed 29.
I don't know why this threw me off. I was like, he just turned 27 last week, and I'm like, wait, he's just hitting his prime. This is the beginning of his prime. This is nuts.
Yeah.
4th in overall grade last year among edges. Number 1 in run D grade with a 92.7. One of the best pass rushers in football. Just one of the best everything in football. I don't care if you're making like a top 20 list of players, if not higher than that, you don't have Max. I think he got in the top 10 this year, didn't he?
Which category?
In the NFL top 100. I think he snuck his
top 10.
I think he snuck his way into like 8 or 9 or something like that, like a top 10 player. You might have to look at it, but no, he's one of the elite players in football, and he's just the effort he brings. Sometimes you get star players who kind of pick and choose when they want to play, but Max Crosby brings it every single play. He's just got like that dog mentality, pass rush, run D. He could drop into coverage and do some things, I'm sure of it, and he would give you 100% effort. This guy is just talent, the perfect combination of talent, effort, and execution. That's just like, man, oh man, he's an elite player in this league. He makes this defense go. I know there's some other guys playing well around him, especially the second half of last year, but I don't think it can be said enough. When we talk about Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, also Max Crosby is in the inner circle. Not like, knocking on the door, he's great in the mid-80s. Like, no, he's in that inner circle. If you talk about elite players, Max Crosby's an elite player.
Yeah, he is not often. You were right, by the way. He was number 10 on the NFL Top 100 this year. He is not often enough mentioned with TJ Watt and Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. A lot of people just talk about, it's the big four, it's the big four. It's a big five. Like it's absolutely a big five. Crosby, 3 straight years of elite PFF grades. What I really want to see from him this year is, the last 2 years have been very strong from him. I just mentioned elite PFF grades from him, but last 2 years, pass rush win percentage was in the 15s. It was 15 point something percent pass rush win percentage. In the 2021 season, it was in the 20s, right? I want it to be back up by the 20s. And that's the thing about those other 4 guys is Watt is sometimes a little bit up and down. His production stays up, but his pass rush win percentage is sometimes a little bit up and down. But Parsons, Garrett, Nick Bosa, those guys are consistently above 20% pass rush win percentage players. Crosby has the ability to do it. I want to see it again this year, which will continue to hopefully chip away, giving him the respect that he deserves as one of the best edge rushers in the league. What about a breakout player that we have for the Las Vegas Raiders?
All right, this is a fun one. Of all the breakout players we've done so far, this is my favorite one to watch. All right.
Okay.
So Trevor, did you wake up this morning ready for a rant on the University of Buffalo?
With you, my friend, I have to wake up ready for literally any sort of obscure rant. So let's hit. I didn't know that it was going to be Buffalo, but hit me with it. Let's go.
Obscure rants are like my favorite thing ever, by the way. All right, here we go. So set the stage. You have Max Crosby. You've had him for a few years. You know he's great. We're trying to find a guy across from him who's gonna be that number 2 guy, the guy who take the triple teams off of Crosby and do all that, right? We draft Tyree Wilson last year with the 7th overall pick. We're getting through the first half of the year. We're struggling. Our coach is about to get fired. Tyree Wilson is struggling to really kind of find his NFL footing, right? He's kind of a lot of talent there, a lot of measurables. Kind of a project, right? He's kind of struggling. We're still looking. We're rotating guys at that other spot. Crosby plays every snap because he's a freak of nature, right? We get to Antonio Pierce being the head coach, and I've got a guy suddenly emerging on the other side. Last year, a 3rd-year man. This year, a 4th-year man out of the University of Buffalo, a school and a position that Raider fans are very, very familiar with, a guy they drafted very high a long time ago and then traded to Chicago and Khalil Mack, right? Yep. They're familiar with really good edge rushers from the University of Buffalo, and they got another one in Malcolm Kuntz, okay? Let me tell you something. When Pierce took this team over, he made Malcolm Kuntz the starter opposite Max Crosby. This guy's a freak. I'm telling you right now, and actually since the merger, he's the 2nd highest drafted player out of the University of Buffalo behind Khalil Mack. So, what did he do last year? He's a power rusher. He's got pass rush moves. He's a really good athlete. Weeks 10 through 18, the second half of last year, a 90 overall grade, the 10th best in football in that stretch. Of course, who's 1 spot ahead of him? Max Crosby. So you're talking about a team that played the second half of last year with 2 top 10 edges. Okay, here's the other one. You want a fun stat that just, of course, makes all the sense in the world?
You're going to give it to me no matter what, so go ahead.
Of course. In that same stretch, only 2 edge players, okay, in those 9 weeks had top 10 run D and pass rush grades. One of them was Malcolm Kuntz, and of course the other one was Khalil Mack. Because of course it was. Because only University of Buffalo edge players could do that, right? Because of course. No, this guy, for real, Trev, if you turn on the tape of him, it starts with a bull rush. It goes with a counter inside move. Sometimes there's just a rip outside move. There's everything in the arsenal. I don't know what they were doing to develop this guy the last 2 years before 2023 because he barely played. But man, oh man, they may have found a freak. They may have found an actual freak, a guy across from Crosby. There are reps in pass rush on tape where the opposing offense is chipping and doubling Kuntz instead of Crosby, and Crosby singled up. That's how good he was playing. And if you look at when the Raiders beat the Chiefs, what was it on Christmas Day, right? I'm pretty sure it was Day. I think it was
later. It was later in the season.
I think it was Christmas. I'm pretty sure it was Christmas Day that Monday when the Raiders went in there and beat the Chiefs without throwing hardly any passes. And a big reason was Malcolm Kuntz giving their tackles the absolute work. Even more so than Crosby. So I'm going to tell you right now, the Raiders are familiar with University of Buffalo pass rushers. We've seen, look, that school doesn't put out a lot of players, but lately they've been putting out some really good ones. You've got Khalil Mack, you've got Malcolm Kuntz, you got Buffalo Joe Andreessen, who just made the Bills roster, and to top it all off, you want to know what else, Trevor? University of Buffalo, that's where my mom went to law school. So clearly, all they do is produce greatness. That's
so the bias is here. Now I understand. Hey, you're pushing the agenda.
I've got the numbers to back it up. They're right here. This guy is the man across from Max Crosby. They have found their number 2 edge rusher from a school that clearly only produces greatness. But in all seriousness, man, if you haven't seen the tape of Kuntz in the second half of last year yet, please go watch it. This is the most fun I've had watching any of these breakout players that we've talked about so far.
Kuntz is a reason why my bold prediction for this Raiders team is having a top 5 defense in the NFL, because I thought the Raiders were good last year. I didn't even realize how good they were. You mentioned since Antonio Pierce took over, they were 7th in total scoring defense in the NFL. They were 9th in total defensive PFF grade last year. So, the EPA per play allowed was, I think, 17th or 18th. So it was a little bit lower, but this group, there are plenty of reasons to think that they're going to be even better this year. You mentioned Malcolm Kuntz is one of them. I think I've heard some other people talk about him throughout the offseason, but that was a very great detailed breakdown, which, look, just saying, shameless plug here. If you guys have a PFF subscription, you could go on your own tangents and rants like this because you can get some fantastic premium stats like Dalton just laid out for you for guys like Malcolm Kuntz for your favorite team. Also, just want to say, love a good since the merger stat. Like anytime you get to start your analysis or a statistic or something with since the merger, I love a good since the merger stat.
Oh yeah,
so,
I mean 1970 is a long time ago, right? We got to have that. I had to cut it off because there was one guy drafted earlier. It was the third round back in like 60 something when there was like 12 teams and it was only like 12 picks per round. I go, okay, that's not. I need the merger here. I need the whole league. I need the AFL involved here with this.
No, it's like the NBA as well. Again, like anytime anybody gets to start a sentence with since the merger, I'm paying attention.
Oh, the shot clock era. That's the NBA one for that.
Oh
the
yeah,
shot clock
that's
era.
a good one too.
Oh yeah, that's always a classic. Yeah.
My breakout player, I'm staying on the defense. I'm going with cornerback Jack Jones. I think this dude's in for a monster year. 2 interceptions in each of the last 2 seasons, a little bit lower, but I just think that he is a smaller corner, but a feisty. He is competitive as hell. Coverage grades of 76.0 and 71.9 over the last couple of seasons, but this preseason specifically, on just 28 coverage snaps, he already nabbed himself an interception, got a forced incompletion, had a 90.6 coverage grade. He looks like he is playing so confidently, and I think that this is a big-time breakout year for Jack Jones. I think he's going to be a beast. The team's best rookie, I already talked about it with Brock Bowers. It's Brock Bowers for me. It has to be. Is it also Brock Bowers for you for the team's best rookie?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I would have, if he was starting, which it doesn't look like he's going to, I would have considered Jackson Powers Johnson too. But no, it's Brock Bowers. I think just such as good a tight end as we've seen come out of college in a while. And to me, what he adds is 2 things. The versatility. He's a chess piece, right? I think he's the ultimate chess piece in this offense. I mentioned it before in the one preseason game he played, 11 snaps lined up at 9 different positions. You're going to have to find him every snap. And he's one of the best after the catch threats, not just at tight end, but one of the best after the catch threats that we've tracked in college football. Tracking it for the last 10, 11 years, certainly over the last 3 years. I mean, I believe he has the most yards after catch of any Power 5 tight end that we've ever tracked. It's what he does. He breaks tackles. He makes plays after the catch. He can turn a 5-yard pass into a 20-yard gain. He's a chain mover. Scores touchdowns. Honestly, a little bit like George Kittle, where you could hand the ball to this guy. And he can make things happen, right?
Yes.
You could get Brock Bowers going on a jet sweep from under center, and he's going to make it happen. They did it at Georgia. He had several games with multiple carries at Georgia. Just get him. He's a football player. Like, he's a football player's football player. That's really what a lot like George Kittle. Not as good a blocker as Kittle, I'll admit that. But when you look at him with the ball in his hands and what he can do after the catch and breaking tackles and the speed, deceptive speed too, he's the full package. And I think he's the guy who, when you talk about having that chess piece that can make other people open up lanes for other people, open up routes for other people, you just always have to find him. He's going to be a matchup problem, no question.
Let's move on to the Denver Broncos, last team in this division. I have them going 4-13. You also have them going 4-13. So what do you think about the Broncos? It's been a whirlwind of the last couple of years for this team with, signing Russell Wilson and hiring Nathaniel Hackett and that looking like a disaster. And then you hire Sean Payton, and it felt like the whole time it was just like the inevitable with them moving on from Wilson. It was just a matter of how they could do it. Now they officially do. Bo Nix is in the building via the 12th overall draft pick this past draft weekend. What do you think about the Broncos? Is this a sneaky team at all? But give me your offensive MVP as well, as you kind of like talk about this team with the new identity with Nix as now their starting quarterback as a rookie.
Yeah, having him, I mean, again, this is another one. The last place teams are hard in this because we're kind of putting together in the schedule. We're kind of finagling with how many wins each team is going to have. So 4 might be a little harsh considering they won 7 last year, and we've seen some really good stuff from Bo Nix in the preseason, right? But I'm not a huge fan yet of this roster and of the depth on this roster where, at receiver, I've got Cortland Sutton, and I'm not really sure what else. We're waiting on Marvin Mims to maybe break out. We've got Greg Dulcich at tight end, who I believe ended the year hurt last year. Got a good group of running backs, right? Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, I know is your favorite person on the planet.
We'll get to him. Don't worry about it.
I already knew. I didn't even have to start typing in this sheet in front of us before I'm like, no matter what, he's going Audric Estime. I already know how this goes. But no, I mean, a team that really struggled. They had the second worst coverage grade in the league last year. They still have a lot to figure out. The good news is if they feel good about their quarterback, Bo Nix, well, you've at least got a quarterback and you've got Sean Payton, right? So they could be better than the 4-13 I have them down for. I wouldn't put them in the playoffs. I don't think they have the roster to be in playoff contention like that. But we'll see week to week. It's really about the development of Nix. My offensive MVP, And Bo Nix is very used to being well protected at Oregon, especially. They were historically good in pass protection last season in front of him. Another underrated tackle, I think, and that's Garrett Bowles, man. An 83.8 pass pro grade last season, was 8th best among all tackles. And I think he's a guy, he's you could argue also that Quinn Miners at right guard, who had a breakout year last year, is their best offensive lineman. He leans more towards the run game, big nasty run blocker on the inside, going to help them, going to help Javonte and Jaleel McLaughlin find open holes and keep them on schedule, because Sean Payton's going to want to run the ball. His best teams have always had balance, right? And even going back to his most recent era with the Saints, and you talk about them having Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, they want to be balanced. And I think Garrett Bowles, though, and this offensive line, even Mike McGlinchey on the other side, protecting a young quarterback, protecting a quarterback like Bo Nix it's big. It's a big thing. I think a big concern that we have, say, with Drake May and the Patriots, we're not sure if he's going to be protected. I feel a lot better about Denver at least protecting Bo Nix and giving him the time he needs to make those decisions.
I think it's a good call out, because I do think that Nix will certainly need a good offensive line in front of him. My offensive MVP is Nix. 80.4 preseason grade on 59 snaps, 78.4 passing grade throughout the preseason. You can see it there on the screen. One big time throw, didn't have any turnover-worthy plays. Adjusted completion rate, very high, just like it was in Oregon. And that's the thing. That's why I think that he is truly the offensive MVP, because you need him to look somewhat like the version of the Bo Nix that we saw at Oregon. And I think that's a big question for people, is what's going to be closer to the NFL version of Nix? What we saw at Auburn or what we saw at Oregon? I think it's going to be close to what we saw at Oregon, but I think there are factors at play that would help him be the better version of sort of the Jekyll and Hyde that was his college football career. So I've got Nix as the offensive MVP, but I think just the natural growing pains of a young quarterback are why it's hard to invest so much in this team, especially when you've got a great head coach in Jim Harbaugh taking over with an elite quarterback in Justin Herbert, also in the division. The Chiefs are a duh. And I've talked about how the Raiders might be a top 5, top 8, top 10, whatever defense in the NFL, which is going to make it really tough for this offense anyway. So you get a really tough division. You got a rookie quarterback. You're going to be working through things, and the roster is still a work in progress as well. So I think we saw, with some of their cuts, they're going more towards a youth movement. It's a long-term plan with Sean Payton, and I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle in the win-loss column this year. But I think that it will be the right kind of struggles. Sometimes you have teams that struggle and you didn't expect it, and then all of a sudden coaches get fired, quarterbacks get changed. I think Denver's kind of already been through theirs. Now it's just about some natural growing pains of a new roster and younger players. What about defensive MVP? Who you got?
Look, I mean, there's a difference between struggles and progress. You're absolutely right. And their defensive unit struggled last year, and 31st in coverage grade. And I think a guy who really has to have a big bounce back is Patrick Surtain, right? And I think you talk about a big drop off. Now, part of the drop off is when you're dropping off, especially in the secondary, in your execution as a team, everybody's grades are going to look lower, because there's so many times where it's passing off and shared assignments and communication and all that stuff. So you still see the talent with Surtain, because even in a down year, still had 9 pass breakups, and he's one of the best tacklers in football. Only missed 3 tackles all last season, right? So he just we need to see more of the high-end stuff, obviously, that we saw in 2022, when some people were talking about him as maybe the best corner in football, right, up in that elite category. And he's certainly got the talent to be in that elite category most seasons. But they do need to make a better environment around him. I don't think it's all on Surtain. The fact that he struggled last year, coverage grade, I believe, was in the mid-60s last year, which certainly is not what you expect from him. I just think they need to execute better as a team, but it would help if Surtain got back to that elite level and we go, okay, we have that guy on the outside out there. That would help a lot. I think a bounce back from Surtain, along with some better pass rush, would go a long way toward helping this team win more games.
It's really hard to stand out as an individual on the defense side of the football when the rest of your defense isn't really playing well. That is especially true in the secondary and at the cornerback position. So, it was a disappointing year for their defense last year. 64.7 coverage grade from Surtain last season, gave up almost double the receiving yards that he did the previous season. And the statistic that I looked at is open target percentage, right? Where, you can you could look at the rest of the defense and say, hey, the guys around me aren't really great. That's why the yards are a lot higher. We can't exactly play as aggressive as we want to. But just the overall open target percentage shows that it was a down year for Surtain, because the open target percentage was right around 28% in 2022. It was all the way up to 37% in 2023. So that's not like terrible, but it is a big jump in terms of how many players that he was guarding ended up counting as open targets when the throw was going their way. And so Surtain's a lot better than that. He could be a lot more sticky in coverage than that. We all know it. It's just kind of time to see it. So I think that how he plays will be a massive part of how well this defense can play around him. What about a breakout player? Who do you guys are a breakout player here?
I think a guy who played well in Miami last year, and it's going to be a big story with Justin Simmons getting cut and going to Atlanta now. Long-time guy back there at safety for Denver, and a lot of people confused as to why they cut him, but it is what it is. They're trying to get younger. They're trying to get less expensive. They're trying to find guys for the future, right? I think Brandon Jones, who comes in as a free agent from the Dolphins, is an interesting player. 17th in the NFL last year in overall end coverage grade, a 76.2 coverage grade. A little bit of everything. He can kind of move around and do a little bit of everything. Really like him in the curl flat tackling. Too high, can play some single high. He had 2 interceptions against the Jets. Take that for what it's worth. But, I mean, He's a guy they're really going to rely on, and they really need to play well, especially with Justin Simmons gone, who was considered the leader of their defense for so many years. Brandon Jones is a guy I have a spotlight on. Had a nice year with the Dolphins last year. If he can do it in that spot for Denver this year, it makes Surtain and everybody else's life easier on the back end of that defense.
I'm going to go with a different player who I agree that Brandon Jones could be a big deal for them. This would be a true breakout. It was like when I was talking about Benito Jones for the Miami Dolphins. Like this isn't an easy one. I think that it would really take a great year from Cody Barton, their linebacker. Like I think the linebacker room is set up well for Barton to stand out. And whether it's going back to his college career at Utah or just what we have seen from him overall, like when he was with the Seattle Seahawks, there have been flashes of potential of what he could be as a coverage linebacker. Last year, 66.2 grade in coverage, which was the highest of his career. I was kind of shocked that was the highest of his career. I thought it'd be a little bit higher, but this preseason is a 72.2. So I think that things are getting better. And I think the fact that I was shocked that it was a 66.2 as his highest of his career speaks to how much I believe he could be a comfortable coverage linebacker in the middle of that defense. If he can really be that type of a player, I think it just helps out everybody. Anytime that you have a really good coverage linebacker that you can rely upon to be valuable in space in the middle of that defense, it really does help everybody out. And Barton is somebody who I think approaches the game at a high IQ level when it comes to that coverage play. And I think that we're going to see the highest coverage grade of his career, or at least I would love to see it from him. And I think if he is a breakout candidate, then this really helps basically everybody else around the defense. So I like him being in this lineup, and I like him having his best year yet. You know who my best rookie is going to be. Who's your best rookie?
It's the same one. I'm going to mention another guy in a second here, but yeah, you have to talk about Bo Nix, and he looked spectacular in the preseason, and he was spectacular the last 2 years at Oregon. You're talking about a guy who led the FBS last year in passing grade and adjusted completion percentage. And the one thing when I went back and watched, especially this last game that he just played, is I might not have given him enough credit, his mobility enough credit, and his ability to make decisions on the move. There are times when he bails from a clean pocket a little too quickly, because there's still one of the themes back when he was at Auburn is like, okay, this guy's just an improviser. He's trying to get out here and just play like Johnny Manziel playground kind of football, right? I think that's kind of how it was at Auburn. Did it less at Oregon because he knew he was pass protected well. They were going to pass protect at an elite level. They always do. So I'm curious on that, but I don't think I gave him enough credit for his mobility. He can take off and run, and last year the best passing grade in the Power 5 when he was moved off of his spot. So he's a guy, there's enough improv. I think he understands. He's got a really good sense, and I think C.J. Stroud has a bit of this too, where it's like a really good sense of just when to get rid of the football, right? Like I'm about to get hit, I'm going to get leveled, like I have just enough time to release this, and on the move when to release it or take off and run. I think some of the improv is going to help him this year, especially. Again, I'm not the biggest believer in their receiving core. There's going to be times where guys just don't get open, right? And that always happens, but especially for them, I think it's going to be a problem. There's going to be some improvisation, but I think his ability to make plays on the move is really going to help. I think he's shown it a lot in the preseason. The other guy I'm going to mention really, really quick, the edge player Jonah Ellis out of Utah. Awesome preseason as well. I think 7 pressures across 2 games. Pressure machine at Utah, boatload of pass rush moves, 100% effort all the time. I think Jonah Ellis is going to get some early playing time for them as well.
Yeah, everybody knows that listens to NFLSC, the NFL Stock Exchange, knows that I have to shout out Audric Estime, who is, I don't want to say like a bit. I would just say he's a fan favorite on the show. We're just constantly, as a show and as a listenership, rooting very hard for Audric Estime, just because that's who we've all rallied around. And I genuinely think that he has the opportunity to be a really solid player. Had a really good preseason, had 2 rushing touchdowns this preseason. They gave him a lot of carries because I think they wanted to see what he could do, because I think they are willing to get him in the mix. I'm not saying that Javonte Williams is going to be bad this year. I'm not saying that like Audric Estime is going to be RB1, but I think he is going to be in that running back rotation much more than we maybe thought that he was going to when the Broncos drafted him where they did. And you look at the last 2 years, really good rushing grades from Estime, 86.6 in 2022, 94.0 last year in 2023, pretty high missed tackles forced per attempt average, pretty high yards after contact average, which are the numbers that we like, which kind of individualize running backs and how they are separate from their offensive line, how their performance and their talent can shine individual of their offensive line. So Estime, I think, is somebody that is going to produce, bit or jokes aside that we have had on that show on NFLSC. I really do think that Estime is in for a pretty solid carry load when it comes to the rotation of how Denver is going to deploy their running backs this year. So as always, rooting for Audric Estime, and I do genuinely believe that he's in for a pretty big year. That is it for the AFC as a whole, the AFC West and the AFC as a whole. We are going to be back with you next week to make sure we knock out all 4 divisions from the NFC before Thursday Night Football and kickoff of the 2024 regular season. I can't wait. I'm so excited for it. But we do have 4 more divisions that we are getting to, so don't worry, all NFC fans out there. We're going to give your teams some love too. We're going to tell you where we have those teams finishing, how we see the division shaping up. We'll give the playoff predictions. And you tease it in this show who you actually have defeating the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I can't wait to get to that next week as well. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Dalton Wasserman. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the PFF NFL show. We will see you guys next week.